Yeah, so when we talk about biochar, there's kind of two main entry points to the conversation. So one entry point is when you have a lot of low value biomass that you're trying to figure out what to do with. So in our research program, we looked at pairing biochar production with environmental restoration activities. So could we use biochar production in forests as a revenue stream to help subsidize thinning operations? It's also been used in post-fire salvage operations. We've looked at pairing it with juniper or rangeland restoration to see if biochar made from juniper could be useful either as a revenue stream, selling it into agricultural uses, or if it could be used directly on the landscape to help with restoration seeding efforts. And then we've also done research with straw biochars, looking at whether it would be a useful revenue stream for farmers to use with seed cleanings or straw, and if it could be paired with energy production as well as improving soil health. And the other entry into talking about biochar is whether we can improve soil function. And so in some senses, the inland Northwest is a really good system to be looking at biochar use. So some of the questions that our work addressed are, can we improve water capture and water use efficiency? Is biochar useful in degraded soils? Like, could it be useful on ridge tops where there's thin soils? And could biochar provide kind of the input of organic matter that could help crop production? And can biochar help restore some of the functions provided by either natural or managed fire, especially bringing in that ash component that helps moderate soil pH? So we've also looked at biochar as a liming alternative to address soil acidification. So in the beginning, I joined a biochar research program in 2015. And I would say what we've learned since that time is we've gotten a bit more strategic, because in the early days, it was a lot of people bringing us biochars that they were experimenting with different production techniques, maybe just backyard kilns or homemade pyrolyzers, all the way up to converting like wood boilers into units that could create biochar as a product, as well as electricity. And so we would get biochars, and the question would be, what can this do? And sometimes there was an agricultural system in mind, and sometimes there wasn't. It was like, what would the best system be for this biochar? So when I look back at the different systems I did work in, one thing that jumped out at me is when we talk about yield response to biochar, there were 3 sites that actually had a yield response, either in hot trials in the greenhouse or in field trials, and they were all acidified soils. And so we were seeing a liming response by adding biochar. So what I'm happy to see is that there's more nuance in the recommendations, that you may not always see yield benefits, and lower quality soils are more likely to have a positive yield response to biochar than high quality soils. And so what can biochar do for the soil? That ash component can increase pH. The biochar itself has a fairly high cation exchange capacity, or it can. Some biochars do. So it could improve that nutrient retention, cation retention in the soil, and it can act as a soil loosener, increasing pore space and addressing compaction issues and infiltration issues. I just wanted to briefly talk about a couple studies I did that are more relevant to the inland region. And so one was a collaboration between our ARS unit and the Gatey Farm in Rockford, Washington. And so David Gatey has an ag engineering degree from Washington State, and he was interested in developing some kind of technology that could help restore some of the function loss when they lost field burning. So they grow mainly Kentucky bluegrass seed. So he built this updraft gasifier. And what that means is that this is specialized for dealing with low density material. So not wood, but chopped wheat straw and also seed cleanings. And the idea is this would create on-farm energy, and the energy would be used to power the seed cleaning mill. And the seed cleaning residuals would also provide the feedstock for the gasifier. And the biochars that he produced, depending on calibration of the conditions, you can either calibrate it towards getting more carbon, or you can calibrate it towards more of a complete combustion and get more ash. And so we looked at the biochars that had a higher ash component and using them as a liming alternative. So this led into a field trial from over 2 seasons with winter wheat. And we applied biochar at a rate to try and get the pH from 4.5 to 5.5. And we had compared that to hydrated lime. So how much biochar is that? It's a lot. It's 8 tons per acre. And this was back 10 years ago, right? So we've gotten better at figuring out how to incorporate biochar, but back then we were just rototilling to make sure it got into the soil. So there are prilled products now, there's banding, there's been more work on figuring out how it could be amenable to a no-till or direct seed system. But what we learned from this is the biochar was effective at increasing the soil pH. So both amendments increased the pH to about a similar level. In the first year of the study, the biochar outperformed the lime in the sense of increased yields. And over the 2 years of the study, the biochar increased yield by a factor of 2.9. Lime increased it by a factor of 1.9. And why there was a difference, we don't totally know. In the first year, which was a wetter year, it appears there was more of a moisture advantage of the biochar, but we don't fully know all the mechanisms in play here. The other aspect of this that we wanted to look at is kind of the feasibility of, would it be possible to produce enough material, enough feedstock on farm, and then would you get enough electricity from the gasifier to power the mill? So the energy from the gasifier is a syngas. It's enriched in methane. And then we were quantifying the power that we could get by actually powering a generator with the syngas. So there was plenty of power produced. That was not a limiting factor, 40 times more electricity than we estimated the mill required. If we look at how much biochar we could get out of the system, if you use all the seed cleanings and you're also harvesting some of the residue at what we would consider a sustainable rate, given the rate of production of material here, you could get enough biochar to raise your pH on 9% of the acreage, from 4.5 to 5.5. And so this seems materially feasible, not considering really the time and the energy that would be required for this enterprise of powering the mill, powering the gasifier. So that was one case study. And then another question that I get asked a lot is, what does biochar do for soil moisture? And so we did another study where we applied biochar at different rates at long-term research sites across Oregon to get into different soil textures, and used 2 biochars that we considered to be the most commercially promising. They're from common feedstocks, and these were both high temperature biochars that would be produced like in a converted power plant, wood fire power plant kind of situation. So we incorporated biochar in the fall and returned in the spring to take cores and then analyze the cores for their hydraulic characteristics. So here's what I found in the laboratory. This is showing the plant available water as biochar rate is increased. The highest rate is 16 tons per acre. So across these 4 soil textures, there was an increase in available moisture. Yay. It took a lot of biochar, though, to see a fairly modest effect. We had enough soil moisture sensors to also instrument 2 of these sites from spring through summer. And at our sandy site, there was really no effect of biochar, but this was a really striking effect of biochar, which was the more biochar we added, the lower the soil moisture. And so this gave me pause. This became difficult to interpret, right? So how can you increase plant available water, but you're actually seeing lower soil moisture? So I turned to modeling to understand this better. Like, is the moisture available to the crop, and would it be available to the crop when it needs it? And this modeling approach suggested, yeah, we are seeing modest increases in the portion of the water budget that could support plant growth. That's available stored water in the soil that plants could access, or it's actually used to support evapotranspiration. So I would say overall from this work, the finding or the conclusion is that you can see a moisture benefit from biochar across a range of soil textures, but it's a modest benefit, and it did take a lot of biochar. So here are some pearls of wisdom that I have kind of taken from this whole body of research. So the one generalization I have about biochar is it is difficult to generalize, and that's because different feedstocks function differently, different production techniques function differently. We had paper reviewers say, why are you looking at moisture benefits of biochar? Everybody knows they're hydrophobic, but that's really low temperature biochars, and high temperature biochars are not hydrophobic. So so that's one thing. This biochar forces you to be humble. When somebody says they've found a fantastic result with biochar, a lot of my research found not much effect of a lot of the soils we were looking at. No harm, but no benefit. But I've seen enough surprise results that I recognize that people are really finding a range of responses. So it's difficult to make recommendations, but I think it is important to not just try it, to ask, can biochar do what I actually have a deficiency in or want to improve a certain function in? And then, you can tailor your choices to biochars that are more likely to be helpful. And also keeping in mind, it's important to use biochars that are from local materials, right? Rather than importing something from California or from far away. That said, I think it is also important to just try things in your system without worrying about overly optimizing it, because I have seen some surprise results. And the final kind of generalization I would make is, I think a lot of the innovations I saw were with people just experimenting with adding things to biochar. So not just biochar alone, but maybe they're adding nutrient sources to it too, or they're adding more available carbon to help feed microbes. They might be adding compost or molasses or a whole variety of things. So I think of biochar as just one ingredient and one component in an intensive management system where you're trying to build up the soil and build up microbial activity and so forth. There's a lot more to learn about biochar, and particularly I'm interested in co-composting with biochar, and manure management, I think, is a very promising application. And then I want to highly recommend these resources, which are pretty new. So these were put together in support of the carbon amendment practice. And here's the link where you can access these. So 3 documents that really reflect my experiences working with biochar. So I was happy to see that. And then this is a decision support tool, the PNW Biochar Atlas, which is currently getting revamped and expanded, but it helps people to figure out what biochars might be a good choice for their situation and determine what rates of application are more likely to produce a result. So that's where I'll stop.